Global competition and technological advances have changed the rules of competition, forcing many firms to become increasingly productive with smaller workforces. This chapter deals with the sometimes unpleasant task of managing an organization's outflow of human resources. In this chapter, we'll 1. Understand employee separations, 2. Gain mastery in identifying types of employee separations, 3. Have familiarity with managing early retirements. Additionally, in Chapter 6, we'll learn practices for managing layoffs and recognize the role of outplacement. Employee separation is the termination of an employee's membership in an organization. Turnover rate is the measure at which an employees leave the firm. Well-managed firms will monitor employee turnover rates and identify and manage causes for turnover. We'll now look at the costs associated with employee separations. The costs of turnover can differ across organizations, and some costs associated with turnover can be difficult to estimate. For example, a firm's geographic location may necessitate a particularly high cost of recruiting new employees, which will cause turnover costs to be unusually high. The effect of lost talent on sales, productivity, research, and development may be tremendous and difficult to estimate. This table lists just some of the costs associated with employee separations. A conservative estimate of turnover costs is from 25% to 300% of the lost employee's annual compensation. Costs can include replacement costs from many aspects and lost opportunity or vacancy costs. Although there are plenty of negative associations with employee separations, there actually can be several benefits. When turnover rates are too low, few new employees will be hired, and opportunities for promotion are sharply decreased. Reduced labor costs. This will affect the bottom line. Not only are the salary savings earned, but also all costs associated with providing benefits and other processing of that employee. Replacement of poor performers. An integral part of management is identifying poor performers. If poor performing employees do not turn around performance, it may be best to terminate. Increased innovation. Separations create advancement opportunities for high-performing individuals and also open up entry-level positions. New hires can fill those positions and offer a fresh perspective. And finally, opportunity for diversity. Separations can offer opportunities to hire diverse employees with varied backgrounds, skills, knowledge, and ability. The two categories of separations are voluntary and involuntary separations. Whereas voluntary separations are initiated by the employee, involuntary separations are initiated by the company. Voluntary separations occur when an employee decides for personal or professional reasons to end the relationship with the company. Unavoidable voluntary separations result from an employee's life decision that extends beyond his or her control. Avoidable voluntary separations pertain to the company's perspective of losing an employee to a more attractive position. The two types of voluntary separations include quits. Employee leaves the company for either a more attractive job alternative or is potentially dissatisfied with the job. And also retirement, and this differs from quits in that it usually occurs at the end of an employee's work cycle. Currently, in order to receive Medicare benefits, retirement is age 65. Note that many Fortune 1000 companies have successfully offered early retirement incentives. Involuntary separations occur when management decides to terminate its relationship with an employee due to 1. Economic necessity, or 2. A poor fit between the employee and the organization. There are two basic types of involuntary separations. The first is discharge, which takes place when management decides that there's a poor fit between the employee and the organization. Much care is needed to avoid legal issues when handling terminations. It's best to seek HR professionals and legal advice, especially for protected class employees, in ensuring the right processes and procedures are done correctly. Layoffs are a means for organizations to cut costs. Layoffs are usually due to economic downturn, circumstances, or restructuring of the organization with need to change or eliminate positions. When a company decides to downsize its operations, its first task is to examine alternatives to layoffs, and early retirements are one alternative considered. Early retirement consists of two features. One, a package of financial incentives that makes it attractive for senior employees to retire earlier than planned, and two, an open window that restricts eligibility to a fairly short period of time, incentives not available after the window. Early retirement policies can reduce the size of a company significantly. Additionally, great care must be taken to manage early retirement carefully, especially legally. When not managed properly, early retirement policies can cause a host of problems. Too many employees may take retirement, the wrong employees may leave, and employees may perceive that they're being forced to leave. Additionally, age discrimination lawsuits may arise if negative perceptions of forced leave are present. One way to avoid too many leaving is to restrict the eligibility. A way to avoid desired employees leaving is to offer a hire back policy within the leave policy as consultants to help train and replace their former positions. To avoid the negative perceptions, the organization must treat all employees the same and treat all employees in the early retirement process the same. To avoid lawsuits, it's best to have legal counsel overlook the whole early retirement process and contract. Typically, an organization will institute a layoff when it cannot reduce its labor costs by any other means. The figure in this illustration is a model of the layoff decision and its alternatives. As we've stated previously, organizations should first try to reduce labor costs by using alternatives to layoffs, such as early retirements. After the organization makes the decision to implement a layoff, it can consider outplacement service benefits to those exiting employees. Most organizations search for an alternative cost reduction methods before turning to layoffs. Attrition is a common strategy. Other approaches include the many listed in this table. Managers can use these alternatives both to reduce labor costs and to protect the jobs of full-time employees. Once the layoff decision has been made, managers must implement it carefully. A layoff can be a traumatic event that affects the lives of thousands of people. The key issues that managers must settle are notifying employees, developing layoff criteria, communicating to laid-off employees, coordinating media relations, maintaining security, and reassuring survivors of the layoff. The WARN Act, which is the Worker Adjustment and Retraining Notification Act, requires U.S. employers with 100 or more employees to give 60 days advance notice to employees who will be laid off. Developing a layoff criteria. Decisions should be made of the criteria whether layoffs will be based on seniority or employee performance. Caution and careful management of this strategy is necessary. Layoffs should be done face-to-face and during the middle of a week. It's crucial to communicate with exiting employees in the most professional, humane, and sensitive way. When you're coordinating with media relations, a good plan for communication to employees is important, but also the message to the outside community is critical because the company's image and how it handles this situation will be under scrutiny. And finally, when maintaining security, a company's property, including virtual communication and information, is important to secure before layoff plans. Password deactivation and key protection of property are extremely important because sometimes people react very negatively toward layoff situations. Additionally, cautions are taken to protect remaining employees. Okay, let's now spend some time looking at the issues and protocols regarding reassuring survivors of a layoff. Those workers who survived that layoff might be considered the lucky ones, but according to research, there are a number of negative consequences found after a layoff event has transpired. Some of the negative effects include increased absenteeism and turnover, lower productivity and poor job satisfaction, as well as increased sabotage in the workplace. Therefore, managers need to take precautions when a layoff event occurs to ensure that those negative consequences are diminished. Many experience anxiety and have guilt over surviving the layoff. After a layoff, it's very important for the organization to display an upbeat and positive atmosphere and to clearly communicate with those employees left behind as a way of rebuilding trust. So let's talk a little bit about outplacement. Outplacement is a program created to help separated employees deal with the emotional stress of job loss and to provide assistance in finding a new job. Outplacement activities are normally handled by an outside firm. The goals of the outplacement process are to reduce morale problems, minimize litigation, and assist laid-off employees. The types of outplacement services are emotional support and job search assistance. Emotional support can mean providing counseling to exiting employees as a way to mitigate anxiety caused by the job loss. The job search assistance is there to help employees find comparable jobs, typically outside the organization. To summarize, employee separations are a difficult but natural component of the way of doing business at some point in an organization's lifespan. Separations can both be voluntary and involuntary, but often both have a big impact on the organization. Layoffs should be used as a last resort, as layoffs can have negative long-term consequences on the remaining employees and the organization's culture and morale. As we've learned and discussed, there are many alternatives to layoffs, and a few helpful outplacement services can be offered to exiting employees.